Greetings, friends. Welcome to our Deep River Friends meeting, virtual worship, our video worship on our YouTube channel. It's so good that you could join us. I'm so glad that we could spend this time together. Hope you've had a good week, and I hope and pray that what we offer you through this medium will be encouraging, challenging, even inspirational, and bring you some hope for your life. So again, welcome. I want to begin our worship by reading a prayer from author Jeannie Miley. She's written a book called Practicing Resurrection, and that's been kind of a theme that I have been centering the messages around and my own life around over the last couple weeks, particularly after Easter. What does it mean to practice resurrection? So I'd like for you to join me to listen. Maybe as we begin, you might close your eyes or gaze softly in the distance, but allow this prayer to invite you into this time of worship. God, who does all things well, move me out of this inertia, this frozenness, this locked up cell of fear or worry or insecurity or grief or whatever into which I have voluntarily walked. I ask you to do for me what I cannot do for myself. But then you remind me that even you need my consent, my willingness, my surrender, my yielded self. Forgive me for expecting you to do for me what I am not willing to do. Forgive me for holding back, for playing games, for playing safe, and even working against you. I'm moving forward, God. I'm saying yes. And my prayer is yes. Lord, hear my prayer. And our prayer and my prayer, and I hope all of our prayers for this next 30 to 45 minutes is that of yes. That we say yes to how God speaks to us. We say yes to God's movement in our life. Maybe we can look back on this week and see where God has been active in our life, speaking to us, creating openings in us. But let's say yes to how God is moving in and among us and around us, and how God is speaking to our conditions. To get us started, we're going to listen and watch Mark play this beautiful song, Holy, Holy, Holy. And as he does, let's say yes to this time together. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, friends, and welcome back, and good to have you with us again. Just one announcement for the coming next few weeks. We don't have many activities going on here at the meeting. We do have on April 27th, Ministering Council will be meeting at 7 p.m., so Ministering Council members, please take note of that. I also want to take this opportunity to invite anyone listening or watching this video. If you would ever like to join us for our contemplative prayer call, we offer one every Wednesday evening and Sunday evening from 8 p.m. till 8:30. It's via Zoom, and I can send you the Zoom link. And it's 30 minutes of simply sharing together in silence, mutual encouragement, sharing prayer concerns, and sharing reflections. But the majority of the time is spent in silence or contemplative prayer. There's no sermon, there's no Bible study. We just allow space for Spirit to speak to each one of us and encourage each of us. So that's every Wednesday and Sunday evening from 8 p.m. to 8:30. If you would like the Zoom link to that, and you're not on our email list, just email us at deepriverfriendsmeeting@gmail.com, and we'll get the information to you. Birthdays we want to celebrate with these friends this coming week. April 18th, David Washam. April 21st, Andreo Parada. April 22nd, Colin Centers. April 23rd, Eddie Solomon. April 27th, Catherine Allen. April 28th, Thomas Crocker and Rob Johnson. And April 29th, Claudia Parada. And I also want to say another special happy birthday for April 29th, our dad, Bill Wagoner. So Dad, I don't know if you watch or listen, but if you are, happy birthday, and have a great birthday on April 29th. Just a few prayer concerns that we want to offer and share. And again, if you have any prayer concerns that you would like us to mention, either be praying for here at the meeting or mention here on our video or on our audio, again, you can just send it to us at deepriverfriendsmeeting@gmail.com, and we will for sure mention it and be praying for you. But we do want to continue prayers for folks within our meeting that are experiencing grief, struggles of any sort and all sorts, even folks that are having struggles with some medical issues, tests, doctor's appointments, ongoing treatment. We've got a number of folks that are going through that, so prayers for them. Prayers for people that are experiencing transitions in their life. Prayers for members of our meeting that are caring for elder and aging parents. Prayers for parents that are going through transitions as they age as well. So we have a number of those, and we know that those are challenges, and prayers for encouragement and strength for those friends and folks and family members. Continued prayers for wisdom and direction for our meeting as we continue to take it week to week, as far as how we are opening up, as how we are being together, how we manage that and how we do that. Prayers for our ministering council and our monthly meeting for business. So thank you for, again, your patience and understanding and your prayers. And prayers for our dear friend Mary Alice Moran, who continues to take it one day at a time under hospice care in her apartment at Friends' Homes. Prayers for her strength, for her encouragement, and that she certainly feels all the strength and love from all of you, as well as from God. So prayers for all these friends and all these folks. So before I offer us a prayer, I'd like to read the passage that I'll base my message on in a few moments. This is out of Luke chapter 24, verses 13 to 32, and many of you are going to know this passage. It's very familiar. It's called The Encounter on the Road to Emmaus. It's a rather lengthy passage, but it's a wonderful story nonetheless. On that same day, 2 disciples were traveling to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking to each other about everything that had happened. And while they were discussing these things, Jesus himself arrived and joined them on their journey. And they were prevented from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you talking about as you walk along?" And they stopped, and their faces downcast. And the one named Cleopas replied, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who is unaware of the things that have taken place there over the last few days?" And he said to them, "What things?" And they said to him, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth. Because of his powerful deeds and words, he was recognized by God and all the people as a prophet. But our chief priests and our leaders handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. And we had hoped he was the one who would redeem Israel. All these things happened 3 days ago, but there's more. Some women from our group have left us stunned. They went to the tomb early this morning, and they didn't find his body. They came to us saying that they had seen a vision of angels who told them he is alive, and some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found things just as the women said. They didn't see him." And then Jesus said to them, "You foolish people, your dull minds keep you from believing all that the prophets talked about. Wasn't it necessary for the Christ to suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" And then he interpreted for them the things written about himself in all the scriptures, starting with Moses and going through all the prophets. And when they came to Emmaus, he acted as if he was going on ahead, but they urged him, saying, "Stay with us. It's nearly evening, and the day is almost over." And so he went in to stay with them. And after he took his seat at the table with them, he took the bread, blessed it, and broke it, and gave it to them. And their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, but he disappeared from their sight. And they said to each other, "Weren't our hearts on fire when he spoke to us along the road, and when he explained the scriptures for us?" It's a wonderful reading, a wonderful story. Let's take those words. I'll offer us a prayer, and then we will go and hear and watch Mark play this beautiful song, "I Need Thee Every Hour." So join with me just for a few moments in prayer. And loving God, you join us on our journey. The journeys we often take in our own disillusionment, our disappointment, our sadness, our fear. Sometimes our hearts are downcast. We know that you join us on this journey that we are on through life. Open our eyes to help us to see what we're not seeing. Open our hearts and souls to the warmth of your presence. Be with those that we have mentioned in prayer, each circumstance, each situation, particularly our friend Mary Alice Moran. Hold her in your love, embrace her in your care and strength. Be with our world, a world that continues to feel the pain of violence and sickness and brokenness. Heal our world, and may we be agents of your healing as we ourselves are made whole again. Now, as we continue on, loving God, in this time of worship, may our hearts be open through the music, through the prepared message, and through the scriptures that continue to speak to us and speak to our condition. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. So friends, here's the song, "I Need Thee Every Hour." Let's use this opportunity as a moment to enter into our own open worship, to listen, to pray, to just simply be present before God. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for a beautiful song that I think goes along with that beautiful passage of Scripture with the men on the road to Emmaus. In the days and weeks and months following the resurrection of Jesus, we might think and assume that all of a sudden the world just became a better place, and all pain stopped, and all brokenness was healed, and all hopelessness and disillusionment dissipated and dissolved away. But in reality, quite the opposite happened. There was fear among the disciples as they hid behind locked doors. There were questions and confusion as the disciples had breakfast with the risen Jesus along the shores of the sea. And there was disillusionment as these two men walked on the road to Emmaus, and they shared about all that they had hoped would happen. And now it seemed in that moment just another con job to get their hopes up. And all of these scenes, and probably more, are somewhat fascinating to observe, at least for me. Because note how quickly everyone in these scenes, followers and disciples, revert back to their fears, their disillusionment, their frustration, and even their hopelessness. It's as if the resurrection never happened. Or at least in that moment, they didn't believe or intend that it would happen. For many, life just went right on with no change, no hope, no expectation. Now, I can look at the disciples and I can be hard on them because of what I know. I can look back. But would I have been any different? Would I have responded any differently? Maybe I would have followed Jesus for those 3 years and promised my allegiance and offered my devotion, but after his execution, more than likely, I would have probably been a bit confused and even disappointed, and promised myself I would never get caught up again in some movement where someone comes along and promises me that the world is going to be a different place and it's going to change, and God's eternal presence is pressing in on us and has the potential to change my life. I probably wouldn't believe that. I might have said to myself, I've learned my lesson this time. I'm just going to keep to myself, pay my taxes, keep my head down, listen to what the Romans say, follow the rules, and make an honest living for my family, and just keep to myself. And maybe I would have been one of those disciples who cowered behind a locked door for fear that I'm going to be arrested because I'd been identified with the group or the movement that followed Jesus. More than likely, I would have been one of the two disciples traveling on the road to Emmaus, and when Jesus comes alongside, they don't recognize him as Jesus. Jesus asks, "Why are you so downcast?" And incredulously, one of them, Cleopas, responds and asks, "Are you unaware of the things that haven't taken place over the last few days?" In other words, in today's language, do you live on another planet? Don't you have a clue? Where have you been? Now, in a kind of provocative fashion, Jesus asks in return, what things? Now, obviously, Jesus knew what things, and maybe Jesus simply needed to have Cleopas and his friends say it so they could articulate for themselves what they're feeling, experiencing, and processing. I don't know if you notice or not, but Jesus often asked more questions than he gave answers. Answers are helpful, but questions often invite us to probe deeper into our soul and our experience. A good simple question can often uncover more in our soul than a very simple and easy answer. Think of some of the questions Jesus asks in his ministry with his disciples. Questions like, what are you looking for? Who do you say that I am? Do you want to get well? Why are you crying? And do you understand what I have done for you? My friend Trevor Hudson has written a wonderful little book entitled Questions God Asks Us. And he writes this, quote, "A question has greater power to transform us than a straightforward answer, especially when it comes from God, who knows exactly what questions to ask." And maybe in this simple exchange between Jesus and the two disciples, we can remember that questions are never our enemies. Rather, questions are this doorway and can be this doorway to deeper understanding and self-awareness. Answers are powerful, but they're often more powerful when they're preceded by questions and honest soul searching and seeking, and especially when Jesus knows exactly what questions to ask in relationship to our own condition. Now back to the disciples. They proceed to tell Jesus all that had happened in the last few days about all their hopes and dreams in this person of Jesus because of his powerful deeds and words, and how he was recognized by God and all the people as a prophet. And they recount how Jesus was handed over to be executed by their own chief priests and leaders. And then they offered this statement. We had hoped, they said, that he was the one who would redeem Israel. Now within that sentence are three words that often come forth from the human soul, at least mine. And those three words are this: we had hoped. How many times in our lifetime have we uttered those words either verbally or in our prayers or in just deep sighing? We had hoped. How often during the course of a day do those words rise up from our soul after we hear the morning news, or we read the morning paper, or after a conversation, or we come away from the doctor's office? In our soul are those three words: we had hoped. There is in the voice of these two men a hint of disillusionment. And no doubt we've all been there. It's easy to get disillusioned. We feel we're turning the corner on the pandemic, and then we're asked to be just a bit more patient. We feel disillusioned. We feel we've moved beyond one mass shooting, and then we wake up to another one. We feel disillusioned. We see moments of peace, and then a conflict breaks out, or a war breaks out, and the world feels like that's the only answer to all the problems, and we feel disillusioned. And even in relationships or congregations, we expect that all will be great, and there'll never be any problems, and there'll never be any disagreements or issues that involve hard discussions, and then they arise, and we feel just a little bit disillusioned. But rather than disillusionment being a negative, maybe in a counterintuitive way, disillusionment comes to us as a gift. Even counselors will tell us that some disillusionment in a relationship or marriage can be a good thing because it burns off, if you will, all of the false expectations of how we think it should be or needs to be, or how it's been. Disillusionment often invites us to face up to what is in front of us and the moment we are living in, and in that moment begin to live in hope. Disillusionment says to me, focus less on what you think should have happened or what you think should be, and live fully into the moment with continued hope and vision, realizing that we often can't truly see what can be until we're willing to deal with what really is. Disillusionment invites us to be in this moment, to experience what we're experiencing, to feel what we're feeling, to dive deep and to listen to what our soul is speaking to us, even when it feels like we're disillusioned and somehow we want to give up and we're just not hearing the news that we want to hear. Now, someone may say, it sounds awfully fatalistic, but I'd argue the opposite. Fatalism believes that nothing good will ever happen and that change will never happen, and this is how it is, so get used to it. Hope, on the other hand, acknowledges this present reality and will even admit that it might be tough at a challenging place, but hope will trust that transformation can take place and that our lives and world can be a place of goodness and light. In his book, Turn My Mourning into Dancing, Henry Nouwen writes this: fatalism is the prevailing attitude of most people, most of the time. It finds expression in statements like, nothing can be done about it, you can't change the world, you must be practical and realistic, you must accept reality. And this easily leads to resentment, bitterness, hopelessness, and despair. But then he adds this about hope. He writes, hope does not come from positive predictions about the state of the world, nor does hope depend on the ups and downs of our lives and its particulars. No, hope rather has to do with God. We have hope and joy in our faith because we believe that while the world in which we live is shrouded in darkness, God has overcome the world. And then he adds this final word. The basis of our hope has to do with the one who is stronger than life and suffering. Faith opens us up to God's sustaining, healing presence. A person in difficulty can trust because of a belief that something else is possible. To trust is to allow for hope. Now, in the story of these two men on the road to Emmaus, we read later that their eyes were opened, and they recognized Jesus in their midst, having dinner with him. They recognized him as the resurrected and risen Jesus. They recognized hope amidst their hopelessness. But even before that, they acknowledged that their hearts were burning within them and their hearts were on fire when Jesus spoke to them along the road and explained the scriptures to them. In other words, before they even fully recognized Jesus in their midst, their hearts began to be strangely warmed, as my Methodist friends would say. They began to experience a very deep longing and fire within their hearts, And their journey took them from disillusionment to hope as they recognized the risen Jesus in the midst of their struggle. That's where they found Jesus. That's where they encountered Jesus, in the very midst of their disillusionment, maybe even their fatalism, maybe even their hopelessness. But they felt within this burning, this warmth, this longing, this flame. I think it's possible that every day, every week, and even every month, we take that journey from disillusionment to hope. But here's the question. Am I willing to walk that journey completely? Or will I get stuck in disillusionment, and will I ignore the burning within my own heart and soul? Am I willing to risk hoping and trusting in the present reality of God in the here and now? Or will I simply numb out to the pain of the world and find a really comfortable resting place in cynicism and fatalism and tell myself, you know what? It is what it is, and nothing can be changed, and we just need to be practical and realistic. I believe the risen Jesus. I believe the risen Jesus comes alongside all of us in our struggles and disillusionment. I believe the risen Jesus comes alongside of us in those moments when our soul seems to say over and over, we had hoped. I believe the risen Jesus comes alongside of us in all those moments, and when Jesus is present, we begin to sense within a fire, a longing, a deep desire to not settle for the status quo, to not give up in the way that things are, but at that moment we have a choice. We can douse those flames with the cold water of fatalism and indifference, or we can open up our souls and allow the oxygen of God's presence to fan the flames into a fire that both purifies our intentions and propels us into the world with a deepened hope and a renewed vision. On the day that I wrote this message, I woke up to another report of another mass shooting, this time in Indianapolis, Indiana. Reports are that 8 people were killed, including the shooter. Just this past week, not too far from where I'm sitting, right here, where I'm making this recording, at around 10:30 p.m. at night, 2 cars engaged in a shootout with one another at the intersection of Eastchester and Windover, just right next door to our property. In one car, 2 people were critically injured and 1 died. And eventually two people were arrested and jailed. And in a matter of moments, 5 lives were literally changed and transformed forever, and not for the good. And then I felt like those 2 guys on the road to Emmaus, but we had hoped. But I had hoped. I had hoped that we could start moving past this violence, that we wouldn't have to read these reports anymore. And I just wanted to shrink back into my disillusionment, my fatalism, and my cynicism and say, you know, it doesn't matter anymore. If they don't care, I don't care. Why should I? But then, honestly, I began to sense that spark in my heart and my soul, that strange but familiar warmth and burning, or that divine spark, as we Quakers like to say. And I sensed that spark that says to me, don't give up. Don't give up. Because that's what the darkness of the world would like for you to do. Don't give in, for that's what the darkness would like for you to do. Don't give up hope, because the darkness would like nothing better for you than to no longer care. And I came to realize that a life that no longer cares and a life that no longer hopes is really no life at all. We may try to fabricate a life, but it has no soul. It has no passion. It has no energy if there is no hope. Only a life that risks hope, that risks possibilities and change is energized with the life, capital L, with the life that is life. So here's my invitation, friends. Pay attention to your own soul. Be honest with yourself about your soul. Have you succumbed to fatalism and indifference? Do you find yourself saying over and over again, but we had hoped, but I had hoped? Or do you find that there's a fire, albeit maybe even a small one? There's a fire within your soul that seeks to burn away this indifference and ignite a renewed hope within you. And maybe that strange warmth within has nothing to do with how you show up in the world right now. Maybe it's more about you simply opening yourself up to the healing grace of God that brings relief and wholeness to the broken and painful parts of your life. Maybe this is a time for you to simply allow God's grace and love to heal your own hurts and love you back into wholeness, to simply rest in that love and allow yourself to be healed. There's a beautiful and familiar hymn titled Spirit of God, Descend Upon My Heart. And the last verse reads this way: Teach me to love thee as thine angels love, one holy passion filling all my frame, the baptism of the heaven-descended dove, my heart an altar, and thy love the flame. So may our hearts be an altar for the flame of God's love. May our hearts be an altar for the flame of God's mercy and grace. And from this flame, from this fire, may we recognize the risen Jesus in our midst. And may we recognize the openings he has for us, much as the early Quakers and Friends received spiritual openings that transformed their lives and propelled them into the world with a transforming witness. A witness that said both in word and deed, the world doesn't have to be this way, and it can be changed. And God has changed us, and now we believe that through us, God can change the world. May it be so. And may hope forever live on in our hearts. May hope forever live on in your heart. And in the midst of those moments in which you utter or pray or sigh, but I had hoped, may you discover or rediscover that warmth, that fire, that divine spark within you, that spark of God's grace and mercy that says we can begin again. You can hope. The risen Jesus is present. Let's take this journey, and I'll open your eyes up to all that is around you, to all the possibilities, to all the dreams, to all that can happen and all that can be in God's new creation and in God's grace and in God's mercy. Friends, we're going to take a few moments and watch and listen to Mark play this beautiful song and hymn, Spirit of God, Descend Upon My Heart, and then we'll come back for some final words. Well, friends, it's been good to spend this time with you. As always, I pray that you've been encouraged. Pray that hope has been sparked in your life. I pray that goodness and joy has been sparked. And maybe in some ways you have felt strangely warmed, as we have said, through this experience. I want to close with this prayer by Jeannie Miley, again from her book, Practicing Resurrection. What will it cost me to practice resurrection? And what does that mean for me anyway? What will it cost me if I don't make the turn? Will I have to change my point of view about life and God or current events? What will it mean for me to practice resurrection in the ways I talk to others, the topics I think about, the way I treat those whose services I need? When I am feeling low or anxious, what will I have to change in order to practice resurrection? Will I still numb myself with television? Will I distract myself, medicate myself to get through an evening? Will I work too hard, live in excess, try to please too much? Loving God, I want the new plan. I want to live as if I believe in you. Help me turn the corner, please. And may we all learn and know how to practice resurrection through this week. God bless you, friends. It's been good to spend this time with you. Hope you'll be well, hope you are well, and trust and know that all will be well. Take care. Hope to see you soon. Love you, and God bless.